morning everyone. Welcome back to the session on fundamentals of computers. Yesterday we were discussing about the basic computer organization. What are the different components inside your CPU? How does it operate? What all control functions do you have inside a computer? All these we have discussed. This is the unit 1 syllabus that we have. I am showing you this syllabus every day because in every session because I wanted you to first understand what you are trying to learn. Based on what you have to learn, then you can learn the components or the functions later. I will be going slowly because I don't know how many of you are familiar with computers or how many of you know the basics of computers. So it will be better if we start from the basics where a person or a student he doesn't even know what a computer is. They should be a little familiar with all the concepts. So that is the reason I am taking a little time to make them understand. And there is nothing difficulty in computers if you start from the starting where it all originated and how did it all evolve. Then you will have a basic understanding of how all this technology has developed so much. From there onwards, if you understand the fundamentals clearly, there would be nothing difficult in computers or the concepts of computers. So, and one more thing what I would be doing is we are having different units, different parts in the first unit, right? I've already discussed basic computer knowledge. Then we are talking about the computer organizations as of now. Next, I'll switch on to input output devices. Once we complete input output devices, then I'll get back to the types of computers, because if you just go according to the flow or according to the topics that are given one after the other, there wouldn't be a sync or you wouldn't be able to link between the different topics. So it's better if we start from the first thing and we'll get into in between, and then we'll shuffle in between and we'll revise all the topics inside the unit 1. That is how we are going to do. So today mostly in this class I'll be completing computer organization. What are the different things that you have to do in the different things that you have inside the computer organization. Then we'll move on to the input devices and all. So yesterday we were talking about the objectives and all, and we were discussing about the 5 basic operations of a computer system. What are they? Initially, without any input you cannot get an output. So first of all, for a computer to work or to perform a task, you have to give some input to the computer. Once you give an input to the computer, it should be stored somewhere so that that input can be used further in the other process, in the same process after some amount of time. Then after storing the input that is provided by the user, it needs to process the input and give out the required result or the output for the task that was programmed to the computer. So that is processing. In processing we have 2 important things. One is arithmetic operations and the other one is logical operations. Arithmetic operations, they all involve addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, etc. And logical operations are all about comparison. Without comparison or without assessing an input that is given by the user, the computer wouldn't be able to accurately give out a result for the program that is given to the computer. So after processing the data that is provided to the computer, it will give an output, and that output can be in any way, like it can be a visual output that is through the monitor, or it can be through printouts, that is a hard copy kind of a thing. And after that we have something called controlling, that is a very important and the basic operation for a computer system. In controlling, what happens? Now we were talking from the input stage till the output stage. All of this needs to be controlled by and monitored by a unit. Otherwise, each of it has only its own function and they don't know how to interact with the others, how to interact and how to get the data processed. They don't know what is the state of the other devices that are present or the other concepts that are present inside the computer. So in order to have an management or in order to have some control over all the other units inside the computer, we are using something called a controlling function. This controlling function, what it does, it actually tells the input, the processing unit as well as the output, at what time what is required and how it has to act and how it has to coordinate with the other components inside the computer. So without controlling we cannot do anything, because input has its own program, input has its own data, or it has its own function, and the scope of input would only be until there. It doesn't know how to interact or how it has to talk with the other components. But in the same way, the output or the processing only is capable, or it handles only the tasks that are programmed for the processor. So in such a case, there should be one unit which controls and tackles all the other units and has a command on each and every unit inside the computer. That is where controlling comes. Okay. And then yesterday in the last we were discussing, or I was trying to explain you the basic organization diagram. This is how the CPU internally is connected to the other components. If somebody, generally when we talk about CPU, everybody just thinks about, or first we'll talk about computer. Anybody in these days, they know how a computer looks, a laptop looks, etc., etc. But generally, what do we know about a computer? We know there will be a monitor. That monitor is connected to the CPU, and that CPU has its connections to the keyboard and mouse. This is how a personal computer or a desktop computer looks like. And a laptop is a very sleek thing which has its monitor integrated to the keyboard, and it is a portable one. This is what we generally know about computers. But over here, when we are talking about the CPU, most of them take it as a mistake where they think the whole cabinet or the whole black box that is connected to the monitor, inside which we have the motherboard, SMPS, your disk drives, etc. All this whole unit, everybody considers it as a CPU, but that is not actually what a CPU is. CPU is something which is internal inside the motherboard, which is integrated into the motherboard, where the components that we are discussing now actually demonstrate what a CPU is actually. CPU is nothing but just a processor. Whatever the processor is connected to and whatever components it interacts with, all those come under the components of a CPU. Other than that, there wouldn't be anything else that can be called as a CPU. The whole unit, which consists of the motherboard, SMPS, your cooling fan, or your disk drives, the whole unit, that is called a CPU cabinet. Inside this cabinet, we have all these components. Along with that, inside the motherboard, the CPU or the processor is integrated. So when you are understanding something, make sure that you understand it accurately and in a very detailed manner. It shouldn't be like we have a computer with a monitor, keyboard, mouse, and it's connected to the CPU, but that is not the CPU actually. Inside that, we have a motherboard into which the CPU is integrated, and your processor actually has the main functioning in your computer. Now, yesterday I was trying to explain you this diagram where, so we are talking about CPU right now, where the lower part of this diagram is, just a minute. Yeah, the lower part of this diagram shows us the CPU. Inside the CPU, we only have two components. One is the arithmetic and logical unit. The second one is the control unit. Control unit we have previously seen, that is called CU generally, and arithmetic and logical unit is called the ALU. The ALU always performs tasks related to the arithmetic operations, whatever addition, subtractions, and whatever mathematical calculations need to be done. All those processes are done by this arithmetic unit, and the logical unit only concentrates on the logic, where if a certain condition is to be met, what are the different possibilities it has in the input, and based on the inputs it provides you an output. So this part is like the brain of your computer, not the whole thing, but at least the arithmetic and logical unit is where the computer actually performs all its calculations. And then this arithmetic and logical unit is connected to a control unit. The control unit is what we have already discussed till now, which has a control of all the other components which are connected to the CPU. The arithmetic and logical unit is the main core part of your CPU, which performs all the operations, and what all operations need to be done and what kind of data it requires, it talks to the control unit, and the control unit in turn, it will connect with one of the components that are required and it will get the data required for the arithmetic and logical unit. This is how it all works. Now, initially in the previous slide we were discussing about the 5 operations of a computer system. What were they? That was input, then we had storage, then we have the processing, that is your processor, and then we had the output and the controlling part. Controlling part, this is the controlling part which we were discussing, but initially we had input. Input unit is where we give the data for the user. From the user we get the data, and that data is then stored in your storage unit. The storage unit primarily consists of 2 things. One is the primary storage and the secondary storage. The CPU never has some connection directly with the secondary unit. It doesn't have direct connection anytime with the secondary unit. Only it has connections with the primary storage, because we'll discuss about primary and secondary storage in detail, what are the different types we have and all. But as of now, just remember that the control unit or the CPU, it has only a direct connection with the primary unit, primary storage, and in turn this primary storage interacts with the secondary storage and gets whatever data it requires. After this, whatever process has been done, the control unit again sends the output that the ALU or the arithmetic and logical unit that it has performed, that will be transferred into the storage unit. From the storage unit we have the output displayed or output given to the user. In the output unit, what happens? The arithmetic and logical unit is all based upon assembly or machine language. What does machine language contain? It contains all the data in zeros and ones. Now the data that is processed by the computer is always in zeros and ones. When it is directly given stored in the storage unit and it's given to the output unit, the user won't be able to understand what is the data that is present inside or what is the data that is processed by the computer. So then there is no use for us to get the process done, because again to decode the output that is given by the ALU, it takes a lot of time. That is why we have some programs internally inside the computer and the output unit which converts or translates the output that is provided by the ALU. The ALU gives an output in zeros and ones, that is machine language, and that machine language output is in turn converted into the readable form or the user form. Okay, and the final output that we are able to see or read is known as the information, because in the starting we were discussing about data processing. What is data processing? Whenever you give an input to the computer, it takes the input, it processes it, and then it gives you something out of it, like there is something useful from the data that we have provided, and it makes some process out of that data and it gives us an information. That information is displayed on the monitor or it's given as a printed copy. So this is a basic flow of your computer system. If you understand clearly what is happening here, take some time to understand this, but this should be the basic fundamental for any kind of a concept that we will be discussing in the later units. Because suppose just to take your storage unit, in the secondary storage you have your hard disk, your external connections, your USBs, CDs, DVD drives, whatever it is, all of them come under your secondary storage. And your primary storage mainly consists of your RAM, ROM, etc., where all the important programs or the main functions that needs to be done are always done from the primary storage, where we have the RAM and ROM. So and then this output unit has another programs which translate your machine language output to the human readable form. This is how you have the whole working of your computer system. Then now we'll be moving on to the next part, that is input unit. Till now we have just had a general idea about what a computer is, what are the different components it has, what are its different operations. After that, now we are moving on to input unit. Once we understand what is an input unit, output unit, and then what are the different types of inputs that we can have for a computer, after that we'll again move back to the different types of computers. So in this way, if we just shuffle our unit one after the other, we'll have a strong fundamental knowledge, as we'll be revising each and everything more than twice. And now let's start with the input unit. What does an input unit mean? An input unit of a computer system performs the following functions. What are the different functions that can be performed by an input unit? We were only talking about feeding an input to the computer or feeding the data into the computer system. That is what we were talking about. So, the same thing is over here. It accepts or reads instructions and data from the outside world. In the previous sessions, I was telling you, like, we have a hardware unit, suppose, into which we don't have any data. Now, if you want the computer to perform a task, and that computer should understand what the user wants. In such a case, you have to put in some input, or you have to program the computer in such a way that it performs the task according to the requirements. For that, you have to feed in instructions to the computer. How do you do that? That is always, and it should only be done through the input. So, the input unit, it accepts or reads instructions and data. Data might be anything. It might be your programs, or it might be any user input that you want to give externally to the computer from the outside world. Then what happens? It converts these instructions and data in computer acceptable form. What do you mean by computer acceptable form here? The computer doesn't understand the English terminology or the alphabets that are written in English language, or any other language that you desire to write in, or any other language that you desire to give the input in. So, first of all, whenever you are feeding the data into the computer, or the programs or instructions that you are feeding into the computer, at that point, the computer first converts whatever data you have provided to the computer, and it converts into the computer acceptable form. The computer acceptable form is nothing but your machine language. So, it converts into zeros and ones. All the data that you have, it is converted into a computer readable form, that is machine language, and then it supplies the converted instructions and data to the computer system for further processing. Now, what is happening? The input unit, when you are feeding it, the input unit has a interpreter kind of thing. Interpreter is nothing but, you can call it, or you can imagine it like a small program which converts whatever the data that you have given as an input from in your English language. Suppose it will convert the same thing into zeros and ones, that is the machine language, so that the computer can understand that code, and it will perform the required operations. Now, in this diagram, the input unit has an interpreter. What does an interpreter mean? The English text that we are providing to the input unit, it will take it and it will first convert it. It will convert it into the computer readable form, and then it will store it inside the computer. Okay, and then this in the primary storage, whatever data is required by the CPU, it will take that, it will get the process done, and it will get it back to it, and it will send it to the output unit. In the output unit, again you have a program that converts the machine language which contains zeros and ones into our English language. So, both of these units are performing the conversion operation in the required form for the CPU. Okay. So, that is the thing. So, first it is accepting the instructions and data from the outside world, that is, suppose let us say in English language, and then it is converting these instructions and data into the computer acceptable form. Once it converts it into the machine language, that code is then it is supplied and given to the CPU. It supplies the converted instructions and data to the computer system for further processing. Whatever processing needs to be done, now the CPU understands, the arithmetic and logical unit, it understands whatever operations need to be done, it performs those operations, gives the data back to the primary storage, and from there it will be transferred to the output unit. Okay. Now, next thing, now we know, now we understood what an input unit actually does in the block diagram. Next we will see what an output unit is. An output unit of a computer system performs the following functions. It accepts the results produced by the computer, which are in coded form and hence cannot be easily understood by us. That is what we were discussing, right? Whatever the CPU performs, it is already in zeros and ones. Now it is sent back to the primary storage on the top of it, where it is connected directly. That primary storage, what it does, it is connected to the output unit. That output unit now gets some data in the form of zeros and ones, purely zeros and ones. Now the output unit should be in such a way that it converts the data exactly what the CPU has transferred it to it, and that data should be exactly converted into human readable form. So whatever data it's getting, that is in coded form and we don't understand what it is. It converts these coded results into human acceptable form, that is the readable form. It converts these coded results into human acceptable form. Okay, once the data or whatever processed information that is given by the CPU to the output unit, then it starts its conversion process and it converts it into the human readable form. That is, suppose if you are giving it in English language, you will get the same thing. Okay. It supplies the converted results to the outside world. This is about output unit. Next, we will see about storage unit. We had a block diagram, right? This side we had input unit, that side you had output unit. In between you had your secondary storage over here. The secondary storage had primary storage and the storage unit had primary storage and secondary storage. That storage unit is further again connected to the control, the CPU. The CPU has a control unit and the arithmetic and logical unit. That is how the internal operation of any basic computer is. Whatever basic computer you take, the basic architecture or the design is in the mentioned form. Okay. Now, we discussed about input unit, output unit. Now, let us discuss about the storage unit. What is the storage unit? What all operations does it perform? Let us see. The storage unit of a computer system holds or stores the following. What is it? It holds the data and instructions required for processing received from input devices. Now, what were we discussing previously? We had an input unit. It was nowhere connected or related to your output unit. Only the controlling, it was nowhere related to the CPU. The input unit only internally it's controlled by the controlling unit. That's it. It is not even directly connected to the arithmetic and logical unit. Now, what is happening? The input unit is only directly connected to the storage unit. The same way, the storage unit is again connected to the output unit. Input and output can only directly access the storage unit and they don't have any direct access to the CPU or the controlling unit which is present inside it. Okay. Now, the data and instructions required for processing, we were talking about the programs, right? We only have a hardware. Suppose we connected all the components that are required for the computer. Now, inside those hardware, you need to have a software or the program that the computer has to perform. Now, without giving some input or without storing some program into the hardware, the computer cannot do anything, because it's all whatever you tell it, whatever you program it, the same can be performed by the computer at a faster rate, at a much more faster rate than a human. That is why we use these computers. For that, what do we have to do? The storage unit need to have data and instructions required for processing. The next thing is intermediate results of processing and the final results of processing before they are released to the output unit. Now, what it means, the storage unit, it holds the programs whatever we want the computer to perform and the instructions, which instruction has to be first performed, what is the second instruction, and so on. That is the first thing the storage unit has. The second thing it has is, while processing, now we have stored some programs into the storage unit. The storage unit is connected to your CPU. The CPU processes some task, and not all, in all cases the programs or the CPU can perform all the tasks related to the task at once, because the CPU might have some other task to be done, or it has to put that task on hold and it has to retrieve some other data related to the same task. There might be different instances. So, in such cases, definitely there should be some intermediate results of processing. Now, the storage unit, what all does it have? The storage unit has secondary storage and primary storage. Let us only focus on the primary storage now, because this primary storage is what that contains your RAM. The primary storage is connected to your CPU, right? The primary storage has RAM. Now, if you understand this much, while processing a task, what happens is the CPU performs an operation, and once it's performing an operation, it has to hold that task for a while, because it had to look out for some other value in the storage unit itself. Now, what it does, it will put this half processed task into the RAM again. It will say you wait for a while, you hold on for a while, I will get some related data for your task and you can get back in. This is how the CPU and the primary storage talk in between them. Now, what will happen if there is a task T1, it is only performed 50%, there is still 50% required to be completed. At that point, the CPU required some other data from the user, and only after the data that is provided by the user the remaining 50% task can be completed. Now what will happen? The task is on hold. Now 50% is processed, right? That is your intermediate result of processing. Like in between, at any percent, like I am just taking an example of 50%, but at any point, whatever percentage has been done of the task, that will be your intermediate results of processing. That data should be stored somewhere else, right? Otherwise, that we will be losing that data, whatever has been processed. So that is the reason the storage unit also takes care of whatever intermediate results of processing have been done. And then once the user gives his input to the computer and it is being taken by the CPU, it completes the remaining 50% task. Now what is happening? Just because the storage unit is able to store whatever the half processed task is there, it is able to store whatever is the half processed task. That is the reason the remaining 50%, whenever we had the data required for the remaining 50% task, we were able to complete it. So storage unit plays a very crucial role in your computer operations. So the input unit we have discussed now, and then we have discussed about the output unit. Now we are seeing the storage unit in which it stores the data and instructions, and then intermediate results, that is in between a task. If it has to hold the task for a while, it will store it again into the primary storage, and from the primary storage it takes the task back and it performs the remaining task that is left. And once the whole task has been completed, the final results of processing will be done, and they'll release it to the output device. What this output device does, it converts that machine language or the zeros and ones coded language into the human readable form again. Now next, till now we discussed about input unit, output unit, storage unit, but what does that storage unit have? We were discussing like primary storage and secondary storage. What does the primary storage have? So there are basically two types of storage units for us. One is primary, the other one is secondary. What does the primary storage have? It is used to hold running program instructions. Whatever is written over here, it's very important, and you have to understand each and every word over here. Only then you will understand the operations that are programmed or performed by a CPU or the computer. Okay. Now what is happening? Primary storage is used to hold running program instructions. We will go one after the other, one after each point. I will explain you that point, and then we will go one after the other. Now we were discussing about the task, right? T1 task. In that T1 task, what is happening? In order for that task to be performed, there should be there is a instruction that the CPU requires to perform that task. Now to perform the T1 task, there are some instructions that are already given to that task, right? That is all holded by this primary storage, and they run those instructions. Whatever instruction that needs to be performed, the task already is assigned to it, and that instruction is primary storage is holding that instruction. Then it is used to hold data, intermediate results, and the results of ongoing processor of jobs. We will discuss about jobs in detail later, but job is nothing but a task. You can consider that job as a task. Task in the sense, if you are opening a Word file or if you are browsing on the internet, these are all different kinds of tasks. When you are opening a new tab on your browser, that will be one more task. So there are different tasks that we perform in our computers in our day-to-day life. This is nothing but the same thing. The task and job are same, but for professional communication, it's better to use jobs. Okay. Now initially when the task is coming to this CPU for its operation, it already has some instructions, whatever needs to be performed, it is assigned to the task. Now this primary storage is helping the task to hold the running program instructions, whatever the program that is running and the task that needs to be completed. This primary storage, it's storing all the data and all the instructions that need to be executed. That is the first point in primary storage. The second thing the primary storage does is, we already discussed about this in the storage unit previously. It holds the data, it is used to hold the data, it is used to store the intermediate results. Intermediate results we have already discussed previously. Task 1 50% it does it, and it requires some other user input, it will go back, it will get that data from there. Until then, that 50% which has been already processed, that is your intermediate result. That intermediate result is stored in your primary unit safely again. After the input is given by the user or whatever additional requirements the CPU had for that task, once it acquires all those resources, then it will take back the half completed task and it will perform the whole task with the complete requirements it had. And then once it completed the whole task, the results are the results of the ongoing processor jobs, whatever it is, they are again stored in the primary storage. So this is how your primary storage works. Then there are some features for your primary storage. They are very fast in operation. They are designed in such a way that they perform their performance is very high. The reason is they are directly connected to the CPU. If the performance is very slow, or if it is not, if it is if it has a medium performance, then there would be so many issues, or the efficiency would really go down for a computer. In order for a computer to perform task at a very higher pace, this primary storage or the RAM that we were discussing, it should be designed in such a way that it has very high performance. So that is the reason they are not like from the starting or from the initial days, the RAM wasn't very fast in its operations. But the concept was designed in such a way that whatever is connected to the CPU, that storage unit, it needs to be really fast. Only then the CPU will be able to immediately access the storage unit, that is the primary storage, and get back and perform multiple tasks at a time. And the next thing is small capacity. This primary storage is always of very small capacity. The reason is, if you have a very large capacity, like your hard disks, your RAM is never in like TBs, because if you have your RAM in TBs, it will be, you'll have so much space in it, and it will take so much time for the instructions to be fetched and to maintain that storage unit. So whenever your storage unit is compact and it's to a sufficient level, that will be enough for the operations of a CPU. Whatever is the required storage for a CPU to perform its operations, only that much is considered for the primary storage. After that, it's always expensive. Primary storage is very expensive. The reason is, it has to be very fast in its operations. Even though it has very small capacity, it's very costly. The reason is, it should be efficient, it should be accurate, and it should be of very it should have very high performance or speed. Okay. Next, it is volatile. This is the most important point in your primary storage. Volatile means, whenever you are switching off your computer, whatever data or whatever instructions, tasks that the RAM is performing, all those are automatically deleted, or they are automatically like, there won't be any other task that is left inside the RAM once the power is turned off. We were talking in the previous classes about circuits. When we were talking about the first and second generation computers, we were talking about vacuum tubes. These vacuum tubes were used as switches, diodes in the circuits. The same way, these primary storage units also have small it is a small IC into which you have hundreds of thousands of transistors. These transistors, only when they get the power inside that small IC, they are able to perform the operations that are required by the CPU, right. So it is designed in such a way that whenever the power is turned off, all the operations that the RAM is storing, or whatever tasks that need to be performed, they are always like, it will be always cleared off. The reason is, generally your RAM is around 2 GB, 4 GB, that is your primary storage. It will be around from 1 GB to like 8 GB, 16 GB. Now every time if this feature is not enabled on your RAM, or if this volatile feature is not included in the design of a RAM, what would happen? Now suppose you are using your computer, you are using the RAM, the CPU is directly connected to the RAM and it's performing its operations with the RAM. At that time, you are using a music player, you are using a browser, and you are also you have opened a PDF file and a Word file. Suppose you have 4 of them, 4 tasks running. Now when you are shutting down, and this RAM, it doesn't, and if it isn't volatile, then what would happen? Even after shutting down your system, it would be able to store the data or the memory the task would require. Now, at the first time, the RAM is 4 GB. Suppose let's assume it's 4 GB, and we were using like 200 MB of RAM for our four operations. The four operations are music player, browser, and then you have your PDF and your Word file. So we have 4 tasks, and these 4 tasks are consuming around 200 MB of RAM. Let's assume out of the 4 GB. Now I have switched off my computer, and only I am giving you an example. Let's assume this is not volatile. Suppose if it is not volatile, and even after your computer is shut down, if it stores the data, then what will happen? This time 200 MB. Next time when I switch on the computer, as the RAM is storing the data, whatever we have performed till then, whatever task we are performing, even after you turn it on, all the data would be stored, or all the task information or instruction set would be stored on the RAM itself. Then what will happen? If I do the same thing for 10-20 times, it will consume almost all the 4 GB of data, because for the next 10 times, if I am using each time like 300 MB of data, 300 MB data is being stored onto the RAM. Then what will happen after we do it for 10 times? It will be like around 300 into 10, it will be 3 GB, around 3 GB, and it was already 200 or 200 MB was already present. So after like 15-20 operations, or how many other operations, it depends upon the task, what will happen? The 4 GB RAM is full, and it doesn't have any other space to add on other tasks that need to be performed. In such cases, what will happen? We have to have very large large memory of RAM, and it becomes very difficult for the computer or the user to maintain them and perform operations on them. So that is the reason we divided the storage unit completely into 2 halves. One is secondary storage, the other one is primary storage. Primary storage, what we designed it in such a way that the primary storage is very small and it needs to be volatile. Only if it is volatile, what will happen? If I am using those 4 applications, browser, music player, a PDF file, Word file, and when I am shutting it down, the 200 MB that it was using previously is like it gets deleted. Whatever data is there inside the RAM or whatever instructions it's performing, all of them are closed down. Then what will happen once the system is shut down and when it turns on again, whatever data that was present inside the RAM, that gets cleared off. Now again when you are starting your system, it will start afresh from whatever 4 GB was there initially, it will start from there. So you have to only see RAM just like a fuel, like how you put in fuel to your computer or to your vehicles. The same way RAM acts as a fuel to your CPU. How much ever RAM, how much ever space you have in your RAM, or how much ever free is your RAM, how much ever you have, the same way that much powerful your CPU can be, or that fast your CPU can perform. If you don't have fuel in your vehicle and if you would like to go for a drive, it won't be able to perform the required operations for you. The same way, if you don't have enough RAM on your computer, the CPU won't be able to perform the required operations for your computer or whatever programs that needs to be done. This is about primary storage. Secondary storage we all know about it, but that deals with hard disk, external USBs, etc. But primary storage is very important. Most of them don't know the importance of primary storage, or they would only think about primary storage as a normal storage. But whatever operations that you are performing, all of them are only based on your primary storage. Okay, and then we have secondary storage, and we'll discuss all this in the next class. In the next session, we'll discuss about secondary storage, what are the different types of secondary storages we have, and that's it for today. Thank you.